Today, we're diving into a major shift happening beneath the surface of AI compute. The key question is no longer just who spends the most money. It is who can turn that money into the most usable compute through better control of the hardware stack.
Our data comes from Epoch AI, an independent research nonprofit. To compare different chips fairly, we use H100 equivalents as a common unit. In simple terms, H100E lets us compare very different AI chips on one scale. It is not perfect, but it gives us a useful way to compare compute capacity across Nvidia, Google, Amazon, AMD, and Huawei. For example, one Google TPU v7 equals 2.3 H100 equivalents.
The first big picture is scale. By the end of 2025, global AI accelerator capacity reached about 20.17 million H100Es, with a deployed cost of roughly $339.8 billion. In 1 year, the installed base more than tripled. This was not just growth, it was an industrial build-out.
At the same time, compute is getting cheaper. In 2022, the cost per H100E was over $36,000. By 2025, that dropped to under $17,000. This deflation is driven by two things: Nvidia's more efficient Blackwell chips and the ASIC invasion of low-cost, custom-built silicon.
Here's a striking reality. Nvidia extracts 80% of the market's capital, but delivers only 66% of the actual compute. This silicon premium is exactly why hyperscalers are designing their own chips. Custom silicon simply delivers more capacity for every dollar spent. The Silicon Reality Matrix shows an asymmetric threat. Nvidia H100 and H200 remain the baseline at about $25,000 per H100E, but Amazon Trainium 2 comes in near $6,100, and Google TPU v6e is even lower, around $4,400. That is not a small discount. That is a new cost curve. Google and Amazon combined own nearly 24% of global compute capacity, yet they only spent 9% of the total market capital to get it.
This chart shows the compute cost curve breaking. H20 in China is extremely expensive on an effective H100E basis, while Nvidia H100 and B200 sit in the middle. Then AMD, Trainium, and especially TPU push the cost sharply lower. Google TPU v6e is the standout number here. AMD and Huawei represent two very different forms of pressure on Nvidia. AMD is the value play, offering cheaper merchant silicon through MI300X. Huawei is the sovereign substitute, driven by China's need for domestic hardware. One competes on price. The other competes through necessity.
AMD's success is heavily tied to Meta, which accounts for 36% of its installed value. While this is a great partnership, it highlights a risk. Other big tech firms are choosing in-house silicon over AMD, limiting AMD's growth to Tier 2 providers and sovereign buyers.
Huawei's story is different. In China, the shift is decisive. Faced with export controls and high prices for merchant silicon, China has pivoted to Huawei. In just 1 year, Huawei's share of the Chinese market jumped from 36% to over 63%. Huawei now dominates Chinese AI infrastructure. The vendor landscape is now fragmented. Nvidia remains dominant, but its position is being challenged by three forces: Google's internal TPU, Amazon's Trainium, and Huawei's sovereign hardware. AMD adds another layer as a lower-cost merchant alternative. The market is no longer a single Nvidia-centered universe. Even while Nvidia added huge revenue in 2025, its cumulative H100E share fell from about 70.1% to 66.5%. The important point is this: revenue can rise while strategic control weakens.
The bottleneck is also shifting. Advanced packaging and high-bandwidth memory are becoming the real choke points. The top 4 players consume over 90% of the world's advanced CoWoS packaging and HBM memory. If you don't control the supply chain, you don't control the market.
On the demand side, procurement strategy determines efficiency. Google has the largest compute fleet, but only the second largest deployed cost. Amazon also performs well because of Trainium. Microsoft, by contrast, spends the most but gets much less compute per dollar because it relies heavily on merchant Nvidia silicon.
This slide puts it simply. Microsoft is the king of spend, relying heavily on Nvidia. Google is the king of compute, fueled by its internal TPUs. That is nearly a 2 times efficiency gap, giving Google a massive lead in raw processing power.
Other hyperscalers are adapting too. Meta uses AMD as a hedge to lower costs without internal silicon. Amazon uses a 2-track strategy: Trainium for internal cost efficiency and Nvidia for premium external workloads, including major cloud customers. The divide between builders and buyers is widening. Google and Amazon increased their combined share of compute capacity from 32.4% to 37%. Microsoft and Meta moved in the opposite direction. The lesson is clear. Integrated builders are pulling ahead because their incremental dollars buy more compute.
This is the vertical integration moat. If Google had bought its 3.8 million TPUs at Nvidia's market rates, it would have cost up to $70 billion more. Amazon also avoided major costs through Trainium. These are not accounting tricks. They are structural savings created by years of hardware investment. Pure Nvidia clouds like CoreWeave and xAI face a depreciation trap. They bought Hopper chips at high prices, but the market is now pricing compute 30% lower. These fleets face an immediate mark-to-market write-down as newer chips arrive. China is paying a heavy price for its infrastructure. Due to export frictions, Chinese companies paid a systemic penalty of $22.5 billion in 2025. They are essentially forced to spend much more for much less compute. The economic toll is clear. China's blended cost per H100E is double the US average. China holds only about 5.5% of global compute capacity, but accounts for 13.6% of deployed dollars. It's an incredibly expensive way to build AI. The era of uniform AI compute is over. Buyers must now choose between 3 paths. Integrated builders like Google and Amazon focus on low-cost custom silicon. Merchant-reliant firms like Microsoft, Meta, and NeoClouds depend on external chip pricing. Sovereign players like China and Huawei accept higher costs for independence. The universal compute market is breaking into separate worlds. So the final takeaway is this: the AI compute race is moving from capital expansion to capital efficiency. The old paradigm was about who can raise the most capital. The new paradigm is who has the best vertical integration. The winners are no longer those who spend more, but those who spend smarter to maximize capital efficiency.